Hi, I'm Adam Robert Lewis, and you're listening to Brewing Actors Podcast, my chance to talk to actors, to hear their stories, what inspired their performances, and what decisions or relationships influenced their work. On today's episode.
He actually mentioned at the time that he thought my ankles were fat. And it was at that point, it was almost like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And if this is what is now going to be required of me, it's not how I dance a role, how I perform, it's about what my ankles are looking like, and that's what they're looking at, then I don't want to be part of that. And so I made the decision early in my 7th year that I was going to leave.
In today's episode, I talked to Lynn Jezzard, a former ballet dancer who rose through the ranks of Northern Ballet, becoming a principal in many of their classic productions. Lynn discusses her humble beginnings in Kent and the pressures dancers can face with creating the perfect physical shape for ballet. Lynn speaks frankly and honestly about her experiences, and her wealth of knowledge is invaluable to those looking to follow her career path. So, like any story, we have to start at the very beginning. This is episode 2 of Brewing Actors Podcast.
Well, I was born in Ramsgate. Ramsgate is a small coastal town, which when I was born, late 50s, early 60s, it was a thriving town, and my parents were both local. My dad was born in Margate, and my mum was born in Margate too. So they were sort of local people.
What did your parents do?
My dad was in the Navy when he left school. He left school very early, and he went into the Navy. And my mum and him met when they were 18 at a roller skating rink.
Really?
Yes. Apparently Dad was the sort of like the superstar of the roller skating.
Were they dancers? Did they dance?
No, not at all. My mum used to do ballroom, and I think my dad attempted to do some ballroom dancing, but he was a little bit clumsy.
Right.
Whereas my mum was probably was more graceful, but it was my grandmother who used to play the piano.
Right.
Which is where sort of the music and dancing and what have you came into my life. And then when I was very young, I was a little bit clumsy apparently, and I used to fall around a lot, bump into things, and so I had a lot of energy, and my mum used to constantly say to me, stop showing off, which I used to think possibly was my early performing. I don't know. But anyway, so she arranged for me to go and have some dancing lessons with...
So your mother encouraged you really from a young age?
I think so. An aunt of mine was working with a lady that taught dancing, like local, just a local dancing school, and they had this little church hall, which at the time I thought was massive, but I've been back since and it's tiny.
Right.
And I initially was taken along on a Saturday morning to do tap.
Right.
And which I absolutely loved because it was noisy and you had these things on the end of your feet that made sounds every time you walked. So
what age were you then?
I was 4.
4?
4 when I went to my first.
Right.
And I did that for about a year.
Just tap?
Just tap. And then the teacher said to my mum, would she like to come and do anything more? And as a local dancing school, they were very good in the performance aspects of things. They used to cart us off to competitions, and we used to go once a month to a hospital, which was a sea bathing hospital in Margate, which is no longer there, and perform for the patients. So from like an early age, I'd learnt to perform. I think the very first time I went onto the stage, and this is just urban myth because this is something my mother tells me, but I can't really remember, that the first time I walked onto the stage, I sort of stood there apparently, burst into tears, and then walked straight off again.
Oh no!
So that could have been the beginning of the end.
Right. The school was nothing to do with primary school. It was
no, it
totally
was
like
totally
an out of school class.
As I say, it was through an aunt of mine who worked with this lady,
Right.
and my mum just took me along because she thought it would be something to do.
So you hadn't started school at that point, or had you?
I started at 4. I was at primary school at that point, and it was actually a convent school, which was a small school, and we didn't do any dancing in that school. I actually really liked sport. I loved running. I think if I hadn't have been a dancer, I think sport might have been something I would have gone into, because I loved running. I always seemed to have a lot of energy. I think that was the crux of the matter for my parents, is they needed for me to get
an outlet.
Get rid of the excess energy that I had. So dancing fulfilled that.
So you started primary school, started the out of school activities, doing the tap, and then when did sort of ballet hit the scene?
Well, probably when I was about 5, 6, we used to do what they used to call Greek dancing, which was basically like a lyrical contemporary thing. And of course, we didn't have the dancing school I was at, we didn't have bars or anything like that. We used to just hang on to the back of chairs and, do our bar work. So when I went for my audition for arts, I didn't really quite understand why everybody was walking over to this bar. I was like, what's that for? Where's my chair?
All right.
I'd never actually used a bar. But so
what was school? Just to scoot back a little. So you started ballet in the same type of after school class.
Yeah.
When was the realization for you that maybe I'd like to train in this? Well, you must have done ballet for a while, right? So
yeah, I did, but I don't think at that age I was thinking, this is what I want to do. I just enjoyed it. I like performing. I like that aspect of it. I like the community. All my friends were at dance school with me, so it was really something to do, I think, at that stage. But as we used to, the dancing school used to do competitions, and one of the competitions was an All England dancing competition, which is a countrywide competition. You all perform locally. Then the sort of top 3, like first, second, and third, they go into what they call like a semi-final. Then you get the final. And my friend and I, we got through to the final of the classical duet. So we performed in this final, which is held in London. And I would have been about 10 at the time, I think.
That's really young, though.
Yeah.
Because when you say that, I was thinking you must have been, 18?
No.
But 10, that's really young.
Yeah, 10. And we won it. And I think there was no one more surprised than my, anybody in my dancing school. Anyway, at that point, we were put into it. We had our photograph taken for the what was then the Dancing Times, which I think is still available. And my dancing teacher said to my parents at that point, and I was just about to change schools, because we still in Kent, they have the grammar school system, so you have to take an 11+.
Okay.
So I was just about to do that and just about to change school, and she said to my mother, has Lynn thought about dancing as a career, as a living, as a career? To which my mother didn't know anything about it. So they looked at schools, and I obviously every dancer thinks, I want to go to the Royal Ballet, because that's where you think that's But my mother was fairly sensible, and she was looking at it from an educational point of view as well. She didn't want me to go to dance school, come out at 16
and not have an education
with no GCSEs. So she wanted to make sure, and at that time Artsed was the only school that was accredited with Kent County Council. So I was able to go and get a grant, because they
which you wouldn't have been able to have if you went to
if I'd gone to the Royal. So I auditioned for Artsed, which was hugely out of my comfort zone as a child. We travelled very little when I was younger. And because my dad, once he came out of the Navy, he decided to set up his own business, and he used to make coin slot machines. And there's a television program now. The one where they put the money in, and then it slides the money onto the belts. Because my dad actually invented that. And
the company isn't still going today.
No, it's not going. But he made that, or he made machines. He used to work for a company, and then that made slot machines, and he taught himself how to make things, how to take them apart, put them together again, which is something he'd learned when he was in the Navy. And then he decided to make and design his own machines, which he did in our back garden shed to start off with. Then he got sort of more and more orders, and in the end he had a business which lasted 30 odd years, 40 years. But his business stopped, of course, when you got all the microchip and things like that. From now, coin slot machines again are back in fashion as a sort of a vintage thing. Whereas for a while they went completely out of fashion
Right.
and everything. And of course, for him, that virtually overnight closed his business. But
So do you think you would have been able to go to arts had you not had the grant?
I think my parents, once I got in, I don't think they expected me to get in, because
Right.
you go for an audition and you arrive and there's hundreds and hundreds of girls going for it, and I don't really think they expected me to get in. And the fact that I did, I think my mother would have moved heaven and earth
To pay
have
for you to
made
go.
sure that I would have
Right.
been able to go. But fortunately, the school said, they gave you forms and things if there's anybody that needs a grant, etc. So I went along for the audition and managed to get a grant to go to the school. So they paid for all of my education. The only thing my parents had to pay for was my clothes.
Right.
So everything else was paid for.
And how far was arts from where you were living?
Well, it was at the time it was in Hertfordshire, so it was a good 3.5 hours,
Right.
which my parents used to do, 6 times a year, and.
But
when
you stayed in Hertfordshire?
Yeah, it was boarding. It was a boarding school,
Right.
which again was a
Tough.
huge, and actually, I have to say I missed home very much. I missed home, but I loved the being in the boarding school. I loved the aspect of the fact that we were dancing for half a day and only did education for half a day. For me, that was heaven.
Right. Did you struggle with that sort of balance? Because I think you've got one aspect of it, which is what you love,
Yeah.
and maybe the other aspect, which is the
Which was something
education
you had to
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you struggle with that, or was
Yeah,
it just
I
something that
would
came
never
natural?
I would never have I would never have said I'm a clever person.
Right.
Anything to do with, I don't think I'm dyslexic, but I don't have, I find spelling, English, anything like that, I've always found it difficult.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, so I think that in some respects, and also because I was in those days, and which is something I didn't realise at the time, I was actually the youngest in my year by at least 2 years. There were some girls
Right.
in my year who were 2 years older than me, which when you're like 14, 15, it's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And of course, I then always just thought, it's because I'm stupid, I'm thick. But actually, it wasn't. It was just that some of my peers were 2 years older than me, and so therefore 2 years more developed.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was fine, and you have, and of course, like with everything in that type of school, you're pushed. There's no chance of you not reaching and not getting your exams, because if you weren't good enough at something, they coached you. We had extra coaching for everything, so in some respects, I probably did better educationally than I would have done
Maybe
had
at
I
a
gone to a
normal
normal
school.
where I
Yeah.
was one of hundreds. But because I was there was 30 odd kids in our year, and we were pushed to achieve, and I came out with 7 GCSEs, which doesn't sound a lot these days when you've got people coming out with 13 A's and A stars. But at that time, for me, that was actually quite an achievement.
So what was it like at arts training to be? I'm guessing it was just ballet, right?
No, we did everything.
Everything. Acting,
drama,
singing.
singing. Only if you took that as a
subject.
specialist subject,
Right.
but it wasn't something that I'd started off singing, and I started off playing the piano, because obviously my grandmother desperately wanted me to play the piano, but she was just so lucky she could hear a tune and then sit at the piano and play it, whereas I spent 3 years going with
Right.
my struggling. I just couldn't. It wasn't something.
So that wasn't for
it
you.
didn't make any sense to me, and I felt that my parents were paying for this extra lessons for me to have piano lessons, because she wanted me to do it, and I said, you're wasting your money. I'd rather you save that money and did something else.
Right.
So yeah, but you could do everything. They even had tennis lessons, and then, I mean, now Arts Ed has a swimming pool, which we didn't have at the time, but
Right.
it's you get a very broad
Yeah.
education.
It's not what drama school is
No,
like now.
Absolutely, and I think it prepared. I mean, obviously, I was very lucky, because when I came out of school, after I eventually graduated, I managed to get into a ballet company, and therefore that was exactly what I wanted to do.
Did you think that you would have? I find drama school really difficult, because there's maybe 30 in a year. Just going back to when I was at drama school, 30 in a year, and you're all hoping to have
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
dream break, whether it
Yeah.
be in the West End or on
Yeah.
tour or wherever it be, or a specific show. So did you think when you were training that I'm gonna I am going to succeed in getting into...
Absolutely not. Ballet was the thing I really wanted to do. It was the class I felt I was the best at, I excelled at. And therefore that's really where I wanted to do. But I'm not your typical shape of a dancer. I'm only 5'3",
right.
and I'm quite muscular. And dancing at that time was just starting to become physically orientated. You know,
okay.
I auditioned at 15 for the Royal Ballet, and of course we got into this audition situation, and you had this we were put into 3 groups, A, B and C. I was in B, and all the girls in A were what I would have called physically perfect girls. They had long legs, they were tiny, and you know, and they all physically looked like ballet dancers. In group B, you had girls who I would say were sort of more dancers. Some could turn, some could jump.
Right.
You know, they had something, and I always had a very, very good elevation, which is quite ironic now. It's because I can't even lift off the floor.
What is that?
Elevation is a jump, so it's just like any sort of jump. So anything jumping in the air, grand jetés, like little jumps. I had a really good elevation, so because I had such strong legs, so I was able to jump very high, and which I think gave my dancing quite a dynamic quality. And I think that obviously they were hoping, or my parents were hoping, that they would see that, and the Royal Ballet would hope that they would, you know, possibly be able to enhance that. But they didn't. They decided that I wasn't right for the school, which, you know, when I was I was 15 at the time, and that was such a huge disappointment because I felt my career had
Did you think that, you know, that was it? Forget it.
Absolutely. And when I left arts, the headmistress of the school at the time said to my parents, well, you know, we don't think Lynn's going to make it as a ballet dancer. She's going to have to dye her hair and fix her teeth, because at the time I had slightly crooked teeth. So my parents were like, okay. And of course that's
You
hard.
didn't have your teeth fixed, did you?
I not straight away.
Right.
I did eventually, but it's...
That's such a blow at such a young age to you that you're not what they want.
I didn't really have the tools to be able to take that on, or what that meant, and I wasn't overly ambitious.
Right.
As in, I didn't see myself going into the commercial world, and I think if you go into that world, you have to be very ambitious, because it's a really, really difficult world, and there are so many people trying to achieve, and I didn't really see myself in that way. I was relatively shy at that point.
That does seem like a big knockback to me.
Yeah.
You didn't get into the Royal Ballet.
Yeah, that's
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm a novice when it comes to ballet. So when somebody says the Royal Ballet, I instantly go, I get what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But to be told, crooked teeth, although you say you weren't particularly ambitious, most people at that point would have gone, do you know what? I'm just gonna forget it.
Yeah, and I think I did. Because I was fortunate enough, because obviously Arts Ed have a school at that time in London, which was sort of like a 3-year course.
Right. So,
and I was, having been through training, you're almost automatically guaranteed a place on that course.
Right.
Which was a dance course. And, you know, they do ballet and everything. And but I'd spent maybe the first 6 months once I went there. And I was 15, 16, suddenly in London, without this strict timetable that we had at Tring, where everything was pushed, you were on site, and suddenly I was in London, living in a hostel, feeling depressed, because I felt, well, what am I going to do if I can't be a ballet dancer? I hadn't really thought about what else I wanted to do. What was plan B? I didn't have plan B. 15, 16, I didn't have a plan B.
But I just think that's so refreshing when you have a plan B. Like, so I spoke to so many people who say, I purposely didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
Because if you do have that plan B, you usually fall back on it.
Yeah.
So it has to work. You think, well, I don't know anything else, so I need to just keep ploughing on.
Well, that's it. And I think I spent 6 months, you know, in a bit of a state of shock, really, not really, you know, floundering around, missing class, not doing, you know, doing all the sort of things that you shouldn't really be doing at 15, 16. And I had an interview about halfway through my year with the headmistress of the school, and she said to me, you've got to pull yourself together, because if you don't, we're going to have to have to chuck you out. Well, it absolutely was the kick in the back set that I needed to get myself back into class. And I had a lovely, lovely teacher called Anne Heaton, who was married to John Field, who was at that time was the director of English National Ballet, which at that time was Festival Ballet. And she was a beautiful dancer, and she took me under her wing, and she had a lot of the same issues that I had physically. And so she sort of understood where I was coming from and the problems that I was facing at that age. And she basically said to me, Lynn, you are a beautiful dancer, you can dance, you can do this. It might just mean that you won't ever go and perform in the Royal Ballet, but there are other ballet companies. And I hadn't even thought about that. I hadn't, it was like Royal Ballet or nothing. And then suddenly it was like, okay, all these doors, my eyes were opened to other aspects, and then from then onwards I sort of knuckled down and got on with things.
Did many other people in your year go on to the Royal Ballet?
We had, from our year when I was at Tring, we had 2 other girls that did get into the Royal Ballet,
right.
But both those girls after a year left because they were miserable and they were unhappy, and neither one of those girls actually then went on to have a career in dance. So in some respects I think having that knock at 15, 16 and having to pick myself up at that point may have actually been a favour to me.
Yeah.
Because
it would maybe have saved it later on in life, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, so I then I was just right place, right time. We had a group of people, a chap called Larry Long, who was an American director, and a choreographer. And they came over to England and they were looking for dancers to start up a ballet company, and they wanted to.
This is while you were still at.
This is while
training.
I was still at school, and
right.
They came to the school to audition, and they took us through our paces, and there must have been about. They came in first of all, I think, and watched a class, and then they had an audition, and of course in the class there was about 20 of us. When they came back to audition, there was about 500. There was
right.
just loads and loads of people in this audition, but because they'd already seen me in class, I was sort of fast-tracked through, and eventually I got offered the job, which was, like, for me it was a dream come true to be offered a job in a ballet company.
And what that was a new ballet company?
It was a new ballet company.
Touring?
It was touring this country, but it was actually a company called Ballet International, and it was it toured this country, but it was being backed by the government in South Africa. So we went to we did a tour of South Africa for 10 weeks, which was amazing. I learnt so much in that time, and it was quite a big company. It was because it was immediately formed. We had like principals and we had all sorts of.
So what were you cast as?
I was at Corps de Ballet.
Right, which is
first year Corps de Ballet.
That is like
just
right. It would be ensemble.
Absolutely, standing on the side of the stage. Willies
holding a spear.
Yeah, absolutely. But a garland or whatever, just basic. But again, I was quite lucky. I was given some nice little things.
Solo bits.
We did in Sleeping Beauty, which is fabulous. You have all the fairies. Well, I was sort of like 5th cast fairy,
right?
Which was great because I didn't get on to do it, but it meant I went to the rehearsals and I learnt the repertoire.
So would the same choreographer who's choreographed the ballet work with you in those cover runs?
Yes,
right.
He would be there taking the rehearsal with the main cast, and then the rest of us would be finding a space somewhere at the back to have a little go.
Right.
And as I say, I never actually got to do it or to perform it, but it was a great experience to do it. And then in Sleeping Beauty you have things like there's a pussycat dance in Act 1, which I learnt, and again it's very basic, and you always get like junior soloists
right.
who get to do that. So again, I was about 5th cast of that, and I did actually get on to do that. And then you have like a doll dance as well. Like the dolls come out of a box, and again I got to do that. So there was lots of little things that I got to do, but the biggest break for me while I was in that company was where they had we did a triple bill, and we went on tour at the time with Margot Fontaine, who was right at the very end of her career, but she was performing, doing various bits and pieces, and she needed a company which we fitted the bill nicely, and we went along. So she did her ballets, and we were shoe torn in the middle of doing like bits and pieces.
Right.
We had this ballet called the Albinoni, which the choreographer escapes me at the moment, but it was a beautiful ballet, and I was third cast of that, which obviously the further you are up, the more chance you get, as you know,
on. Yeah, of course.
Of getting on.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, when
so you went from fifth to third. Oh,
so I was moving up.
You were moving up the ladder.
I was moving up. So, and this was quite a contemporary piece, but it was very lyrical, which played into all my strengths, all the things that I could do, and it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful piece, and I loved doing it. And fortunately, when we were on tour with Margot, we were in Holland. Can't remember whereabouts, possibly The Hague, somewhere like that. And I suddenly got this call in the morning. You're on. So I spent all afternoon rehearsing with my partner, and we went on that night, and it was absolutely amazing. And it's the first time I have ever taken a curtain call on my own.
Amazing.
And been given flowers. And I didn't know what to do with them. I was all like, ooh. And as you know, there's a bit in Phantom where the Christine gets given flowers. So I always really...
What that feeling is.
I know exactly.
I was just about to say there's an exact same thing.
And so I always know exactly what that feels like. You come out, you take your curtain call, and someone's suddenly thrusting flowers at you. And I was like, I think I took them by the stems, and I was sort of hanging them down, you know. And afterwards, when I came off stage, the ballet master, which was a lovely man called Adrian Greater, and he said to me, Lynn, he said, it was absolutely beautiful, but I need to show you how to take a curtain call with some flowers. And I was like, thank you. But so I was very lucky to get an opportunity to do that. And I think I did it about 3 or 4 times after that, you know, because it was because of injury and stuff like that.
Right.
But every single time I loved it. And of course, any time you go on and you do something like that,
it's a dream.
It's a dream, and it informs you, and it makes you want to work harder, because you know that actually that's really what I want to do. So I was devastated when 9 months in, the company went bust, and we were in Hull, I think, at the time. And
why did it go bust?
I'm not really sure of the exact reasons. I think it was a lot to do with the apartheid and stuff like that at that point in time in South Africa. You know, the money coming into the company from South Africa
It dried.
Yeah. So for whatever reasons we were. And of course, when we had been to South Africa, when we came back, the climate in this country at that time was that wherever we performed, because we had the South African taint to it, we had people outside the theatre protesting.
Right.
And I think it got to the stage where you know,
boycotting the.
Yeah, absolutely. People weren't. You couldn't get people coming into to see the shows, which was a real shame, because it was a beautiful company. So I spent 6 months out of work, and
So how long were you with the Ballet International?
I was 9 months altogether.
9 months.
9 months from all rehearsals. I think it was about a couple of months rehearsals. Then we went straight to South Africa, and then we came back and were touring this country.
So you were quickly progressing from 5th cast, 3rd cast. So you were 3rd cast when it went bust, right?
When it
closed.
Yes.
To out of work.
To out of work.
So what did you do in that period?
Well, of course, in London, you've got a thriving class. There's Pineapple. So I was
constantly training.
Doing class. I was back into class. But of course, that takes money. You know, you need money to do that. And you know, I put a bit of money away, but of course that quickly went. So I had to find work, and I trolled myself up and down Oxford Street just before Christmas, because this was just before Christmas. It was about 2 months before Christmas. And of course, every shop I went into, no experience. And I'm like, quick learner, I'm a quick learner. Anyway, I saw an advert in the Evening Standard, and for Liberties, and I phoned up. I was actually on the corner of Liberties, right? I was, you know, at Oxford Street, and in those days before mobile phones, you had to walk into a phone box, pay phone, put money in, and I called and I said, I'm inquiring about the job you have for Christmas staff. And she said, oh, yes. And I said, I've got no experience, but I'm a really quick learner. She said, give me your name and address. Anyway, I gave her my name, and she suddenly started screaming down the phone, you're not Lynn Jezzard from Tring, are you? And I went, yes, thinking, maybe I'm very famous. Maybe 3rd cast, I'm famous.
Yes.
And it was actually somebody who I had been at Tring with, who was working in the department, recruiting department.
So you clearly got the job.
So she said, come round now. So I literally put the phone down, walked across the road, walked into the personnel office, and filled in the forms. And I worked there all over Christmas. And then I was...
Doing what? Was it just...
It was, they had I don't even know if it's still there, but they had a department called Home Ideas. So it was a new department at that time, and it had sort of stationery and office stuff and I mean, just loads of pretty things, which I loved, you know, and I loved all that. So that was a huge change, and because it was, the working hours were like, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning, I had to be there till 5 o'clock at night. So it meant for me, it was difficult to find time to do class. But the guy that was like the head of our floor was an ex-actor, so he sort of knew what it was like. So he would let me go for auditions and stuff like that. And of course, I was just throwing in as many classes as I could.
And what type of auditions were you going for? Ballet, or was it anything?
Anything. I was just trying to get work.
Right. So what was the next?
Well, the next thing for me was Northern Ballet.
Right.
And I and again, I got that audition through Anne Heaton.
Right.
Who'd kept in contact with me, or I kept in contact with her, and she phoned me and said they're looking for a dancer for Northern Ballet. A chap called Robert De Warren has just taken over the company. He's looking to change the company from a contemporary company to, he wants to do mini classics.
Yeah, classics.
You know, I'd mentioned your name, and I was like, oh, thank you so much. So I did this private audition, having not really been, you know, completely in training at that point.
Right.
So I found myself saying to him the whole time, I'm so sorry, I'm a little bit out
So
of
he
training.
auditioned you, right?
He auditioned me. And after the audition, he said to me, I would love you to come up. And I got a 3-month trial, because of course it was based in Manchester and I was living in London. So there was a lot of things to have to think about. Accommodation. I'd never been to Manchester. I didn't know anything about it.
Were you aware of Northern Ballet at the time?
No. If I was honest, no. Not really. And I'd done quite a few. I'd done about 3 auditions for English National, but they were like cattle markets, which was Festival Ballet at the time, and I would desperately have liked to have got into Festival Ballet. But again, it's difficult in that sort of environment when there's hundreds of people. So to get a private audition was a dream come true.
And really. You had some form of validation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did they offer you? What was the job?
Again, it was a chorus, you know, a choreographer or whatever. It was, you know, get straight in there, doing all the bits and pieces. But because it was a small company, instead of being third cast, I was like second cast.
Right.
Of the big roles. So I suddenly found myself going in and having to learn roles like Coppelia, Giselle. So again, big like Midsummer Night's Dream, Titania and stuff like that, The Lovers. So there was a lot of big roles, and if you worked hard and you put yourself, you could progress very quickly. And I was very fortunate that Robert liked me a lot and gave me a lot of opportunities. So we went into doing a Coppelia in London. It was their Northern Ballet's big debut in London. First time they'd ever performed in London, and I was third cast Coppelia, and I suddenly found my name up as playing Coppelia on the first night, which was huge.
She went ill.
I was just given.
Oh, you were just given it.
I was given it, and so, which, as you can imagine, that didn't go down very well to anybody but me. I was thrilled, but it caused a lot of problems. But I was just internally grateful to be given it, because it gave me an opportunity to perform in London. It was at Sadler's Wells, which was before Sadler's Wells had been changed as it is now. It was in the old days. So of course you walk out into Sadler's Wells Theatre in those days, and it just had the history of who's been there, who's performed on this stage. It had the most enormous rake, so it was a big challenge. But Coppelia as a role played into me as a character, and everything that I thought that I was quite good at. The things that I'm not necessarily that good at, Coppelia was everything that I was good at. So it was actually quite
It was like the ultimate role for you.
It was a very good role for me, very characterful. So I really enjoyed the challenge. I was really glad that I got the opportunity to do it. Got lots of lovely reviews, and it was wonderful. And it was great for my parents and my family. Everybody was able to come and see me, whereas when I was in Manchester, a lot of people hadn't seen me dance. So it was a really.
So was that a shift for you in terms of given that role?
Massive.
And
yeah,
from
and
then on.
Well, I was the next year. I became a junior principal of the company, which was a big shift. I would never have got that had I been in a smaller company. I'd have probably had to work 5-6 years before being given that sort of title. So, and I knew that was because of the company and the type of company it was. But even still, it was still a big, a big thing to be given. And I did everything. I did all the roles that in Northern Ballet. And I literally, for me, it was a dream come true. I still struggled with my weight. I've always had problems with my weight.
Were they supportive of that, or not so much?
To begin with, they were, and obviously to begin with, when there's so much to do, so much to learn. I lost a lot of weight. I became very slim. But then, when you go out on tour and you don't have access to a kitchen, you tend to go out to eat of an evening. You're working long hours, so you tend to put rubbish food in. You're not eating well. No. There was not so much education in those days, as well as the sort of
nutrition.
Thing. Like these days, you can walk into sushi bars, any bar you go into, and you get salads. Those days, it was sandwich bars. Right. Everything was sandwiches, So that was the sort of thing that you would stuff in really quickly before a show.
Sounds brilliant to me.
Well, absolutely, me too. I wasn't complaining, but unfortunately, my figure didn't always agree with that. So,
right. So when you say they were supportive to begin with. Did it become an increasing issue?
Yeah, it became an issue. After I'd been there, obviously 7 odd years, it became a bit of an issue for them. And I had one conversation. I had a very, very, very close friend of mine who were in the company, and she was a soloist in the company, but she had a real problem with her food, with eating, and she was anorexic.
Right.
And she was just very thin, but she looked beautiful when she was dancing, but she couldn't dance very often because she didn't have the energy. And I had I was called in to speak to the ballet master and what have you, and he said, I want you to aspire to look like Janet. And I said, well, for a start, Janet's 3 inches taller than me and a completely different shape to me. I said, I don't understand how you expect me to lose that weight. And he said, to start off with, he said, you need to starve yourself, he said, and lose all your body fat, he said, and start again. And I was like, and how do you suggest I do this whilst I'm performing and doing class every day? I said, I'll become ill, I'll make myself ill. And he said, yes, he said, but if you want to be a dancer and want to be the best, this is what you need to do.
So was that the point where you sort of hit a crossroad and thought, is this what I want to be doing to myself?
No, and he actually mentioned at the time that he thought my ankles were fat. And it was at that point, it was almost like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And if this is what is now going to be required of me, it's not how I dance a role, how I perform. It's about what my ankles are looking like. And that's what they're looking at. Then I don't want to be part of that. And so I made the decision early in my 7th year that I was going to leave. And so I did. And unfortunately, when you make a decision like that, things started being taken away from me, roles started being taken away. So I had a very difficult last 6 months. But I couldn't wait to get out and start something new and something different. And of course, once I left, I then started just literally going to every audition that I could possibly go to. Didn't matter what it was.
So what was next? So you left Northern Ballet.
Yeah, I left Northern Ballet, and I did quite a few commercial things. I did a few bits and pieces with Arlene Phillips, because Arlene Phillips had actually been a teacher of mine when I was at school.
Really?
She taught us jazz, and we used to, when she was first starting out, she used to take a whole group of people, dancers, to choreographic competitions under the Hot Gossip umbrella. But of course, it wasn't Hot Gossip as we know it.
No.
It was just the name of the dance group. And I was always the token classical dancer in it. Arlene loved classical dance. She loved the discipline that classical dancers had. And all her jazz was based on classical...
Classic work.
Right. The technique of dancing. So her classes were all about classical technique, but taken in a more jazz way. So again, I loved doing her classes, and
So did that open you up to maybe a different side of the industry that you hadn't worked before?
Yeah, and I would never have said that I was a good jazz dancer. I felt that I came at jazz from a classical point of view, so I could do it, but I don't know if I could ever throw off the classical look that I had, because I was, and I think once having been then it was bad enough when I was at college and I was supposed to go away and dye my hair and correct my teeth, but once you've been in a company for 10 years, which at that point I had been, it was very difficult to then
strip away that
that classical look. And I remember turning up to auditions, which we're talking now like early 80s, you know, with girls with massive hair and, you know, leotards up around their hip bones, you know, and I'd be there with my little you know, skirt on and my hair in a bun, you know, and I was like, don't think I'm going to get this job. So I struggled a little.
You struggled a lot after that.
I struggled to alter my look.
Right. So what was the next?
I did a couple of pantomimes and stuff like that.
Did you ever feel, not that panto is less, but I suppose ballet is very classical, and nowadays it sort of goes with opera being sort of a, I don't know, a higher society viewing rather than something. Years ago it was for the peasants, but somehow money got hold of these industries like ballet and opera and sort of elevated them to something that
high art almost.
High art.
Yeah.
Did you feel a little? Did you miss it?
Not really.
Because panto and I would imagine Midsummer Night's Dream are very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was quite lucky because my first panto that I did was in Manchester, because obviously I had a home up there. And when the Palace Theatre now, of course, is quite well established, but when we were living in Manchester, it was actually closed, and they refurbished it, and Northern Ballet opened it, and we opened it with a ballet called Alice in Wonderland, which I was obviously the main part in that. So my poster was up at the stage door, and then when I came in to do panto, I was walking through the stage door, and they were going, "Hi, there you are!" And from having been in the principal dressing room on the first floor, I'm suddenly up in about the fifth floor or something with 12 other people. So it was a huge learning curve. But as I said, it was the choreographer of the pantomime was a lady called Carol Todd. And she said to me, she said, "Darling," she said, "you're going to stick out like a sore thumb," she said, "because of your..." And I said, "I'll be as bad as you want me to be. I just need to work. I just want to work." And so she created a little, you know, a part of Deux for me, and she created stuff for me to do, which was lovely of her. So it was a way of sort of bridging the gap. But not a lot of choreographers would have done that. And then the next pantomime I did was with Wayne Sleep.
Right.
And he at that time was taking a group of dancers around the country, because they just had this big television series called Dash, and they went round all the country. And so I would say at that time your best sort of 5 or 6 dancers were in this Dash, and I was very fortunate that I got in to do it because one of the girls was pregnant. So I knew a lady called Nicola Traherne who had been with me in Northern Ballet, who is now, she looks after all the Mamma Mia tours and what have you. So she left Northern Ballet just before me, but so she got me this job basically. So again, it was through word of mouth, and funnily enough, the lady who was looking after the Dash tours was a lady called Annie Allen, who was then Gilly Lynn's assistant for the Phantom of the Opera audition.
Right.
So
it's all through word of mouth.
All through word
I know.
of mouth.
I hate that sort of term when people say it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
But I suppose who you know will only get you so far.
Opens the door.
But it does open the door. You still got to deliver.
Yeah, you have to. And I'd like to think it opened the door because
you're only getting those recommendations because they like what you do.
They liked what I did, you know. But
so
that was for me the connection.
So did that bring you to the Phantom auditions?
I was living in Manchester at the time, and I was doing. I was still doing panto, I think, and somebody said, "Oh, you see, they're doing an audition for Phantom of the Opera," and of course,
did you have any idea what it was about?
Nothing at all. And so I went. I came down to London, and I did the auditions. And the very first audition, as I say, it was at the top of Sadler's Wells. So they had a studio at the top of Sadler's Wells, and there was 2 studios going, and there was people in each studio, and you were literally coming in and doing a step, and then they were saying, "Thank you very much. come back tomorrow, thank you very much, and I got to come back tomorrow.
These are open auditions?
These were open auditions, and so of course I went back up to Manchester that night, came back down again the next day, and I did an audition, and again we were in the same studio, and there were so many people, we were put into 3 groups, so they went around and went A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. So the A groups would go onto the bar and do an exercise, B and C, and so on. But again, it was very fortunate because Annie Allen was then taking that audition with Jilly, so she took that audition, doing the class and everything. So again, I was quite lucky because I could see there was a lot of finger pointing and a lot of discussing. So immediately out of this massive...
And it was very what you knew in terms of classic ballet.
It was completely classical. It was a classical bar. And when we came in, we did a routine actually to what is now, I now know, is Music of the Night. But at that time I didn't. It was just a piece of music. And she set a routine to that, which we learned. Jilly did. And we learned that. And then we had to do it, and of course I had to get back to do the pantomime of the evening, so I had to leave by 3:00 to get my train, and we'd been there since like 9:00 in the morning. And I'd mentioned this to Annie, I'd said that I need to leave anyway, so suddenly I heard my name being called to the front, and Annie said, oh, I've told Jilly that you need to leave. So Jilly saw me do this routine, and then she got me onto the floor and she made me do the splits either side, and then I had to do this back bend, and then she said to me, and do you sing? And I went, yes, which was a complete and utter fib. But I went, yes. Thinking,
had you sung much before then?
No, I'd sung a lot as a child.
Right, but not since you started ballet, or professional ballet dancer?
In choirs at school and in church choirs, yeah, but not professionally.
Right.
In any way at all.
Right.
No training.
So you weren't sure what was expected of you when she said, "Can you sing?"
I just wanted to go yes.
Yeah.
Because I thought if I say no,
then that's it.
So I just wanted to say yes. So I did. Then thinking, oh, she might ask you, but she didn't, fortunately. And then I went away, and I didn't hear anything about it for a couple of weeks. And I was driving what is now my husband, but at the time was my boyfriend, mad. I said, I haven't got it. And he said, for goodness sake, ring. So I rang what is now Cameron McIntosh's office, and I said, I did an audition for Phantom of the Opera, and I just wondered if there was any feedback. Papers shuffling. Anyway, eventually they got back on the phone. They said, yes, you have a recall, but we don't know when it will be, but we have a recall. And I was then, so I did another audition, which was a dance audition, and I suppose there must have been about 30 girls at that, which Annie took, and we did this routine, and we went into a lot more detail.
What is it like in those type of auditions? Because auditions that I do, there's only one of you in the room, so there's nobody to gauge. You can't gauge anything.
No.
Do you gauge in a dance audition? Are you going, definitely. I am miles better than this one, or
yes.
Yes,
definitely, all that goes on.
Really?
Yeah, and I knew quite a few of the girls that were in the audition, so I already knew
what the competition
was and where the standard was. So of course, the thing that you don't know, and we didn't know at that time, which of course now when you go into an audition for Phantom, is you know exactly what you're looking for because you know what the choreography is. But
at the time, I guess nothing was set.
You didn't know what was being asked of you. She was just purely basing it on, she wanted the best classical dancers. She wanted people who could do all the classical.
Was it difficult?
Technique.
Were the auditions difficult?
It was difficult. It was very difficult. And Jilly,
compared to what you knew?
No, it wasn't any more difficult than what I knew, but it was of a high standard compared with some of the other auditions that I'd been to for musicals. I'd auditioned for 42nd Street, and other musicals which were sort of tap based and more what I would call contemporary modern jazz sort of thing. Whereas this was very much classical. So this was going back to what I consider to be my roots. So I loved it. I felt at home. I felt at ease because it was something I knew and something I felt comfortable with doing. And I got on with Jilly, I think, almost immediately. And
you were aware of?
I was aware of Jilly, and when I was at Tring, we used to have every year, we had a modern cup and a ballet cup and a singing cup, and she came in and adjudicated the modern cup for 2 years whilst I was there. On both occasions I came third in each year. So I was aware of her. She was possibly aware of me through that, and I know it was probably a very small part of Jilly's life, obviously, because she choreographed, Hot as Sixpence and big films and Cats. So
she really was.
I didn't expect her remember me, but she always, once I got to know Gilly, she said she did remember me. She remembered me from being
you stood out,
and she remembered me. And apparently she'd been to see the Coppelia that I had done when it was in London. She'd come to see it, so she'd seen that performance. So again, I didn't know that. I didn't know that she'd seen those things. So she had a knowledge of me. So when Annie mentioned to me in my name to her in the audition, she had a vague idea of who I was. So that was quite nice.
So how did you manage to get away with the singing audition?
Well,
Did you do a singing audition?
I did do a singing audition, and again, it was in the days of Walkmans. So we did the dance audition, and that we finished that. And the singing audition, it was the final audition, and there was Hal Prince, and Gilly, and a few other people, Howard Harrison, Nick Allett, I think, was there. A few big wigs, Cameron, all in the room. And I was walked into, and you go to the piano, you give your piece, and I was singing All I Want Is a Room Somewhere. Dreadfully. Anyway, I went in, and all the girls in the room had got headphones on and Walkmans, and they were going doing all their warm-ups, and I was just standing with my I didn't have that facility. I just had my
sheet music,
and I was like, ooh. So I felt immediately that this was part of the audition I didn't feel comfortable with, and so I gave my music to the pianist, and I started going through because the big chunk in the middle that I cut out. And anyway, so I was talking to him about that, and then suddenly the door opened, chairs went back, and in comes Andrew Lloyd Webber, and of course everyone's like, oh, there's coffee cups going, and I'm going, all I want at the piano's room somewhere, and I'm thinking he's probably thought he's walked into the wrong room.
Yeah.
Because obviously I knew exactly who he was at the time.
I think I would have died.
Cameron, but certainly Andrew Lloyd Webber at that time was huge, and of course coffee cups. It was coffee. No plastic cups. It was coffee cups. Coffee cups were coming out.
Ching, ching, ching,
ching, ching, and I'm still going, well, wouldn't it be lovely at the piano? Anyway, so I sort of then waited and thinking I was going to be called into the middle of the room to sing, and Gilly went, "Thank you very much, Lynn." And off I went. So you actually
never really sang for the piano.
I didn't go into the centre of the room to sing.
Do you think that was her way of maybe fudging it a little?
Getting rid of me. Because I had had a singing audition prior to that, which we did at the Windmill Theatre. And again, it was, I sang, and afterwards I thought, oh, that was absolutely dreadful. And when I came out, I thought, oh, that's it, I've lost it. And at this point, I think there was about 12 girls left and one boy. So I thought, oh, I'm going to lose it on my... So then we were all of a very similar standard, and I thought, I'll lose it because I can't sing. And the stage management, who I don't have no idea who she was, she said to me, don't worry, I've heard worse. And I was thinking, I'm not quite sure what she means by that. But anyway...
Backhanded compliment.
Hopefully she meant today she'd heard worse. So, so I think that was possibly Gilly's way of getting me out of the room.
So you got the job?
And I got the job. We then and it was literally like a chorus line. We were all brought back in, put into a line, and being moved around, and everyone discussing you and what have you. And I was fortunately one of the 6 girls that got it. So
it was only 6 ballet girls.
6 ballet
girls.
Is
it still 6?
6.
Oh, it's still 6.
6, and then they added a girl for a swing.
Okay.
But it was 6, and then of course Meg a swing, but it was 6 dance girls.
Did you realise then? I suppose that was very... maybe the hype had started or not?
No, at that point, I was just thrilled to get a job.
Of course.
So I was really thrilled about that. And it wasn't until once I got the job that everybody kept saying, oh, he's been... Because the thing about Andrew Lloyd Webber is that he's massive with publicity. I mean, so there was huge publicity. You'd got Sarah Brightman and singing, or
Cliff Richard.
You'd got
Steve
Steve Harley singing. So there was already all that out there. So you sort of knew that
there was an underlying buzz.
And Evita and all the Joseph and all those.
Done so well.
So you knew that you were not going into something that was
going to maybe a flop.
Yeah. And of course everybody knew who Hal Prince was and his reputation. So you knew they had some really, really good people on board. So it was a very, very, very exciting.
What were the rehearsals like? Were they tough?
Yes, because I think Gilly fought very hard to get dancing into it. Because I think when we actually got there, having done this really, really difficult audition, we actually found that there was very little for us to do. There wasn't actually a ballet at that point for us. we had this little Degas section, which was the back of the dressing room scene, which is a pivotal scene in the show for storytelling, and we're sort of in the background.
But that was the only scene at the beginning?
We did the Hannibal again, where we're dancing, story being
other
told.
Stuff going on, so not necessarily you're the focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, Masquerade, which was her big thing, but then everybody was in that. The whole company was in that, so it wasn't just the dancers. I mean, we were very much focused, but it was... So we didn't have a ballet, and Gilly worked really hard to
get the Il Muto.
To get the Il Muto ballet. And so Andrew did that for her. And she would come into the room and she said, I've got 16 bars. We've added another 8 bars. So from that point of view, it was brilliant, you know. And I felt that we were all working very closely we bonded as a group of people because of that.
Was she great to work with, Gilly?
Oh, always. I mean, she's taskmaster. She's never tired. Never ever tired. You know yourself. She had, and in those days, she really did have energy for days. So we worked very long hours. You know, everybody else would go and we'd be working till 10 o'clock at night. You know, and I've previously, when I worked with her since, you know, we always when we did the 25th, Gilly and I worked for 10 days before. Then we brought the ballet girls in and we worked for a week before the rest of the company joined. We'd already put 2.5 weeks worth of work into what we were going to do for the 25th. So she really was a hard-working woman and herself, and she expected that of everybody that worked with her or for her. She expected you to...
Yeah, sadly, obviously I didn't really work with her that much, but that one time when she came in to do the 30th anniversary rehearsals, I couldn't believe I don't know, it was like an aura around her.
That's it. She has
it's
energy
like a magnet
and passion.
And I think I don't know, I couldn't take my eyes off her. And she was, her detail.
Absolutely.
She was clocking things all over the place.
Yeah. Well, when we did Il Muto, we had like 30 odd dancers, and you know, we were doing the main dance, and she'd got these girls at the back with the garlands, and we were trying to work, and we were obviously with it, we were limited time, and she's working with these girls at the back, and I remember thinking to myself, we've got to hurry up, Gilly, we need to work, you know, we've got to do this, and I thought, what's she doing at the back there? And of course, then when I stood back and watched what she'd done, it was amazing. It framed the whole piece, and only Gilly could have seen that. She had such a brilliant eye for detail and for what something is going to look like, and I just stood back in awe, thinking, I can't believe I'm actually privileged enough to be working by your side. She was an amazing lady.
So you opened when? 1986?
Yes,
was it?
1986, 9th of October.
What was it like that night?
Incredible. And we'd already done a couple of weeks previewing before that, and we'd had a gala night just before we opened, which was for Princess Diana, which was, again, because at that time she was in the height of her fame, and she loved ballet. And we'd all, you know, you had these big lineups.
Yeah.
And of course we got all this Brightman and everybody, and all the managers and everybody standing at the front, and we, the ballet girls, were standing in the back. Well, she pushed past the cast to go and talk to the ballet girls, because she knew one of the girls who had been in a ballet company called London City Ballet, and she was the patron of that ballet company. So she knew Alison. So she pushed past to come to speak to her and then to us, and we were all sort of like crowded around her talking. So it just made you feel about 6 feet tall. So that was incredible. And yeah, I would like to think that I could go back into myself on that day and remember more of what it was about. But you become so obsessed with your point shoes, your costume, your wigs,
the small
your
details
makeup,
which are going to make
that make you get onto that stage, that you don't actually take in and
the
appreciate
whole picture.
the whole.
You don't.
And of course, you didn't know on that day that it was actually going to be 32, 33 years later. I'm still going to be talking about it.
Did you ever think then? Because I always find it fascinating to think, you know, such a huge hit and such a, you know, one of my most adored shows.
Yeah.
That you would still be sat here almost 33, because you've pretty much been here for 33 years.
33 years, yeah.
That you'd still be in this building for 33 years.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I do think that my connection with the show has been a little bit... I've just been very lucky in the fact that, because I was in the original cast, that gives you a sort of a knowledge of the show and its
how it was created, the ups and the downs, I suppose.
And I've seen people come and go, and I was very lucky when I was pregnant with my daughter, which was 2 years into the show. I was asked to come in and look after the show whilst I was pregnant. So because the girl that was Patty Merrin, who was looking after the Showtime, went over to do the production in Stockholm, so they needed someone to keep an eye on the show. So I came in to do that. So,
was that a resident choreographer job?
So it was like dance captain.
Dance captain.
At that
you didn't
time.
have another dance captain.
No, that was it. That was it. So I came in as that to look after the show. So it from like 2 years in, I already was looking at the show to note it, to learn it, to see where people were. So of course I started with that knowledge. Because I think up until then I had only learnt my part in the show, right. And of course I'd looked at other bits, but I didn't learn it. So that was when I first learnt the show, started to begin to understand
what the creative process of being on the creative team would be like,
and seeing things, through their eyes.
Did you have to have the sign off from Gilly? Did she have to? I
presume she must have done. She didn't. She
never discussed it with
you.
But
she must have given the okay. I can't believe that she wouldn't have done. I would imagine that she would have gone through Gilly and probably through Hal as well. But we had a director here at the time called Jeff Ferris, he was around. So it wasn't like I was doing it on my own. So he was
it tough to sort of take that job on, but still be in the ballet company?
Yes, I found until I actually was given the title of resident choreographer, that was quite a difficult thing to do, to be in the dressing room at night putting on your costumes and then
with
to have to stand
with
back
everybody
and give
else.
Notes.
And was it just notes on the ballet that you were given?
Absolutely.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. That was literally, so it would have been the Hannibal dancing. I wouldn't have noted the ensemble. Again, the Degas.
Did you ever find yourself at that point clocking other things and thinking, I would maybe do this, so I'd maybe do that?
I don't know about maybe do this, maybe do that, but I certainly clocked it, and I would know when I could see when it wasn't working, and
right.
I could see how I might be able to help
fix
that.
But
I wasn't.
You didn't say anything at that time.
No, absolutely not. No, I would have been crucified if I'd have.
Right.
I would have given an opinion to people like to Jeff. I would have definitely spoken about it, but I would never have noted the company at that point. So that came later. So
I suppose a note to end really. Clearly we've been here for nearly an hour.
Wow.
And it's so wonderful to finally sit down and sort of go through the history of your career and everything else. And having worked with you for the last 3 years, which has been a dream really. But what do you think the lasting legacy will be? It's a shame we've just lost Hal, we've lost Gilly. These are people who put this show together.
Yeah.
And it's sort of we hand the keys on, I guess. It's like Philip Griffiths will always say, we are merely renting the costumes. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on.
Yeah.
What legacy would you like to leave behind?
Oh, it's a difficult question.
Because you'll leave an imprint here, of course, won't you?
Well, I hope so. Yeah. I think for me, I would like people to love the show as much as I love the show, and I think if I can instill even a little bit of that into the cast as they come in and go out, I think that's good. If I can make people enjoy their time here and love doing the show, because I think sometimes people can come into a show that's been on for a long time with a slight negative thought. I'm taking over a role that has been done by What am I going to be able to give to that role that maybe the 30 other people before me have given? And for me, it's trying to unlock that, what other people can do, and how you can then, by doing that, move the show on, move it into a different direction, because it is different people's ideas, new people coming in who give different ideas. And the blocking of the show is one thing, and obviously that's important to me because the show has a picture, and I think Hal and Gilly had a picture and a thought in their mind about what they wanted to do, and I feel quite passionate that I want to try and keep that picture going for as long as possible. But I do think that from the interpretation of the role, it is what new people, fresh people, young people coming into the show, that's what they bring to the picture, and I'd like to hope that I can keep the passion for that for the show. And then obviously, if you can keep the passion going on stage, then hopefully you can keep the passion of the audience coming in. Because if people on stage are loving what they do, then the audience are going to love it as well.
It floods over the footlights.
Yeah. And on Monday when we opened, for me, when everybody stood up as soon as the show finished, I thought, job done. We're here. That's what we've achieved. The audience are loving what we've put on, and it's 33 years later, and they still want to stand up and enjoy the show. So I hope that's my legacy. Is to keep, and obviously I've got people underneath Claire and people like that who, you know, hopefully learn from me and you know, and go from there really.